The discovery shows that its construction was a far greater collaborative effort than scientists believe.
In 2024, a team of geologists ran a chemical fingerprint on the stone lying at the dead center of Stonehenge and traced it to a place nobody had ever thought to look, the far north of Scotland, more than 460 miles away. The slab is called the altar stone. It weighs around 6 tons. It lies flat in the middle of the monument, and it is half buried under 2 collapsed giants. Most visitors walk straight past it without ever noticing it is there. For a century, the textbooks said that stone came from Wales. They were wrong by about 400 miles. And the question that replaced the old answer is much harder to live with, because nobody can explain how 6 tons of sandstone traveled the length of Britain 5,000 years ago. Start with what Stonehenge is actually built from, because this is where most people go wrong. There are 3 kinds of stone in that circle, not one kind. 3, and they come from 3 different places. The first are the sarsens. These are the giants, the ones in every photograph. Upright, standing 20 to 23 feet, 6 to 7 meters tall, weighing about 20 tons each, capped with horizontal lintels across the top. In 2020, a team led by David Nash at the University of Brighton finally pinned down where they came from, and the breakthrough arrived from an unlikely direction. During repair work in the 1950s, a core had been drilled out of one of the stones and quietly kept as a souvenir. It ended up in Florida. Decades later, it was handed back. The team was allowed to cut it open and test the chemistry inside, and it matched a place called West Woods on the Marlborough Downs. That is 16 miles, 25 kilometers north. A brutal haul, but a local one. The second kind are the bluestones, smaller, darker, set inside the Sarsen Ring. Those came from the Preseli Hills in West Wales, over 125 miles, 200 kilometers away. Archaeologists have known that for decades, and on its own, it was already strange enough. Then there is the third, a single stone, the altar stone. For most of the last 100 years, it was simply lumped in with the bluestones. The logic was reasonable. It is sandstone. The bluestones came from Wales, so the altar stone probably came from Wales too, somewhere in the Anglo-Welsh Basin. Nobody pushed very hard on it because nobody thought there was much left to find. Then geologists actually started testing it, and the Welsh match kept failing. The work that settled the question was published in Nature in August 2024. It was led by Anthony Clarke, a PhD student at Curtin University in Perth, working with colleagues at Aberystwyth, Adelaide, and University College London. His team took fragments of the altar stone and went after the microscopic grains locked inside it: zircon, apatite, rutile. Each grain carries its own age and its own chemistry, and taken together, they work like a fingerprint of the landscape that sand originally eroded out of. The numbers came back strange. Most of the zircon grains were somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 million years old, while the rutile and apatite clustered around 450 million. That combination does not exist in Welsh bedrock. So the team started working outward, comparing the fingerprint against sedimentary formations across Britain and Ireland, one after another, ruling them out as they went. They found the match in the Orcadian Basin in northeast Scotland. At least 466 miles, 750 kilometers, from Salisbury Plain. The statistical confidence sat above 95%, and every other candidate in Britain and Ireland was excluded. A century of assumption, gone in a single paper. Which leaves the part that nobody can answer cleanly. How does a 6-ton slab cross an entire island 5,000 years ago? There are 2 possibilities, and they have been at war for a long time. The first is ice. The glacial theory says nobody carried anything at all. During an ice age, glaciers scraped across Britain, tore up rock, and dumped it hundreds of miles from where they found it. If a glacier happened to leave a Scottish slab and a scatter of Welsh boulders sitting on Salisbury Plain, then the builders of Stonehenge hauled nothing. They just used what was already lying there. It is a deflating idea. It was also very hard to disprove. The second possibility is people, that Neolithic communities picked these specific stones on purpose, worked them loose, and moved them overland, and probably by water, because the stones mattered enough to justify it. For years, the whole argument turned on a rock about the size of your hand. It is called the Newall boulder. It was dug up at Stonehenge in 1924 by an excavator named Lieutenant Colonel Hawley, and then it sat in a museum collection for decades. Early on, someone looked at its worn, rounded surface and called it a glacial erratic, a stone smoothed by ice. That single object became the strongest physical evidence the glacier camp had. In 2025, a team led by Richard Bevins at Aberystwyth University took it apart properly, using X-ray analysis, geochemistry, and detailed study of the surface textures. The ice reading did not survive. There were no glacial striations on it, none of the scratches ice leaves behind. The wear on the surface traced to ordinary weathering and to centuries spent buried, not to being dragged beneath a glacier. Its chemistry matched Craig Rossi Faline in Pembrokeshire, and its odd bullet-shaped profile matched the natural tops of the rhyolite columns standing at that Welsh outcrop, which means it had not been rounded by ice at all. It came out of the ground already shaped that way. There was a broader problem for the ice theory too. Field surveys across Salisbury Plain have turned up no glacial deposits and no erratics. Ice is not tidy. If a glacier had delivered a cargo of foreign rock to that spot, it would have left the evidence scattered everywhere around it. Nothing like that has been found. Then, in January 2026, Clarke and Kirkland at Curtin turned their fingerprinting method directly onto the transport question and published the result in Communications Earth and Environment. It pointed the same way. The reasoning is simple enough. Ice is indiscriminate. A glacier grinds up whatever is in front of it and drops a chaotic mixture of everything. What sits at Stonehenge is not a chaotic mixture. It is a small number of specific rock types from a small number of specific places. That is not what dumping looks like. That is what choosing looks like. So the harder answer is probably the right one. People moved them. For the altar stone, the nature team suggested the journey was most likely made by sea. Dragging 6 tons over 466 miles, 750 kilometers, of mountain and bog is close to impossible. Floating it down the coastline is merely very difficult. If that is what happened, the Neolithic Britain had boats that could carry a 6-ton block along an open coast, and the organization to plan that trip and see it through to the end. And someone had to know the stone was up there in the first place. That is the quiet part. The knowledge traveled 460 miles before the stone did. There is one more thing worth knowing, and it is the reason this story is not finished. The Orcadian Basin is not a dot on a map. It is a huge stretch of country running from Orkney and Shetland down through Caithness and Sutherland, past Inverness and east into Aberdeenshire. The obvious place to start looking was Orkney itself. Orkney has a spectacular Neolithic landscape, including the Ring of Brodgar and the stones of Stennis, and there is solid evidence that Orkney and Stonehenge were somehow in contact around 3000 BC, sharing pottery styles and ways of building houses. So Bevins and his colleagues carried portable X-ray equipment north and tested the stones at both circles against the altar stone. No match. Whatever the altar stone is, it did not come from mainland Orkney. So, the search area is still open, somewhere across the northeast of Scotland. So, Stonehenge is not one monument. It is 3 journeys from 3 directions, and the longest of them ran the entire length of Britain, for reasons nobody has recovered. The altar stone is still lying there, flat, half hidden under the wreckage of 2 fallen Sarsens, while 1 million people a year walk over the ground around it. The exact outcrop it came from has still not been found. They are still looking.